The black woman walked into the federal courthouse at 7:47 a.m. No makeup, no jewelry, hair pulled back in a simple twist that had seen better days. She wore a plain gray blazer over a white blouse, the kind of outfit that whispered invisibility rather than screamed importance. Everything about her suggested someone the system had already chewed up and was preparing to spit out again. Officer Garrett Sloan spotted her the moment she stepped through the glass doors. 12 years on the force had trained his eyes to find certain people in a crowd, and this woman fit every profile he had learned to target. His lip curled into a sneer that had become muscle memory, a reflex as natural as breathing. Well, well, another welfare queen trying to game the system. His voice carried across the security checkpoint loud enough for the growing line of attorneys and clerks to hear. A few shifted uncomfortably. Most pretended not to notice. This was the federal courthouse, after all. Things happened here that nobody wanted to witness. What's wrong, sweetheart? Food stamps not enough anymore? Decided to come see what else you can squeeze out of hard-working taxpayers? The woman said nothing. She simply placed her worn leather bag on the conveyor belt and walked toward the metal detector with the measured steps of someone who understood exactly what was happening and had decided to let it unfold. The machine beeped as she passed through. That's what I thought. Step aside. His partner materialized beside her before she could take another step. Officer Bryce Carver was younger, quieter, but his eyes held the same cold calculation. Together they formed a wall of blue uniforms and polished badges, blocking any path forward or backward. The security supervisor, Deputy Warden Hollis Murdoch, watched from his elevated station. His fingers drummed a lazy rhythm on the console, as if this were merely a mildly entertaining show rather than a developing confrontation. He made no move to intervene. He never did. The woman's voice emerged calm when she finally spoke.
These are the
Unsettlingly
RTS
calm.
exhibits you requested.
I have identification in my bag that will clarify. Did I ask you to speak? Garrett snatched her bag before she could finish, rifling through its contents with exaggerated suspicion. Papers scattered across the security table. A leather case tumbled out and clattered against the metal surface. He picked it up, flipped it open for half a second, then tossed it aside with a snort. Nice try. Where'd you buy this fake badge? Same place you got that knockoff purse? The handcuffs came next. Cold steel that bit into her wrists with practiced cruelty, cinched tight enough to leave marks that would purple by evening. The kind of tight that spoke not of protocol but of punishment. According to the incident log that would later be entered into federal evidence, timestamp 7:52 a.m., case reference 2024, FL0847. 3 words justified everything that followed. Suspected fraudulent credentials. 3 words to strip a woman of her dignity. 3 words that had worked countless times before. They marched her toward the back corridor, past the metal detectors and the X-ray machines, past the gathering crowd of courthouse employees who suddenly found their shoes extraordinarily interesting. A young man in a crisp suit opened his mouth as if to object, then closed it when Garrett shot him a look that promised consequences. The woman being dragged between them did not struggle, did not cry, did not beg or plead or demand to know what was happening. She simply observed. Her eyes tracked each security camera mounted along the ceiling, noting which ones had their recording lights illuminated and which showed only darkness. She read every name tag within her line of sight. Badge number 4471 on Garrett's chest. Badge number 3829 pinned to Bryce's uniform. The way Murdoch turned slightly away as they passed his station, creating distance through body language alone. She memorized it all with the efficiency of someone who had spent years cataloging details that would later become evidence. Time to teach you about respecting authority. Garrett's words echoed against the walls as they approached a door marked security personnel only. His hand found the small of her back and shoved, propelling her through the doorway into darkness. The door clicked shut behind them. The room was small and cold, designed to intimidate rather than accommodate. Concrete walls painted institutional gray absorbed what little light filtered through the single fluorescent fixture overhead, its tubes buzzing with an inconsistent hum. A metal chair sat bolted to the center of the floor, its presence explaining itself without words. Garrett shoved the woman toward that chair with enough force to make her stumble. She caught herself before falling, maintaining her balance with a grace that seemed almost practiced, and turned to face her captors with an expression that revealed nothing. Sit. She lowered herself onto the cold metal surface while keeping her cuffed hands visible behind her back. Her posture remained straight despite the awkward position. Her chin stayed level. Her breathing stayed controlled. Bryce circled behind her, his footsteps deliberate on the concrete. His fingers found her shoulders and pressed down, not hard enough to bruise visibly, but firm enough to communicate complete control. She did not resist. Garrett walked to a metal cabinet mounted on the far wall and yanked open its door with a screech of hinges. Inside, arranged with disturbing neatness, sat items that had no place in a courthouse security room. Zip ties, a collapsible baton, and resting on the top shelf, catching the flickering light, an electric hair clipper with its cord wrapped in neat loops. He lifted the clipper and turned back toward the chair, letting the cord unspool behind him as he approached. The device felt comfortable in his grip, familiar. You know what they do to people who don't know their place? He plugged the cord into an outlet near the chair. The clipper hummed to life with the sound that filled the small room. They take away everything that makes you feel special. Your clothes, your dignity. He brought the vibrating blade close to her face, close enough that she could feel its mechanical warmth against her cheek. Your hair. The woman's eyes tracked the clipper without flinching. Her voice emerged steady when she spoke, each word measured. This will be documented. Garrett laughed. Documented? By who? The cameras in here have been broken for months. Nobody's watching. Nobody's coming. He looked to Murdoch, who had slipped through the door and now leaned against the frame with his arms crossed. The security supervisor nodded once, a small gesture of confirmation. Besides, Garrett continued, bringing the clipper to hover just above her hairline, who's going to believe you over 3 officers with spotless records? You're nobody. Just another troublemaker who resisted during a routine security check. The first stroke cut a jagged path through her hair, sending dark strands tumbling to the concrete floor. Garrett worked without precision or care, his movements rough and deliberate, designed to humiliate rather than simply shear. That's better. Now you're starting to look like what you really are. Bryce pulled out his phone and began capturing images, the camera clicking with each press of the shutter. Smile for the camera. These are going to look great in the group chat. Murdoch shifted by the door. Don't leave marks on the face, and delete those photos before you leave this room. Relax, Bryce replied, still snapping pictures. These are just for us. A little souvenir. More hair fell as Garrett continued his work, creating patches and uneven spots across her scalp with careless strokes. Some areas he shaved close to the skin, leaving angry red marks where the blade pressed too hard. Others he left in ragged clumps, the inconsistency itself a message. Through it all, the woman remained silent. Her hands stayed still behind her back, fingers interlaced. Only the slight movement of her right thumb against her collar suggested anything beyond passive endurance. A small adjustment, barely noticeable. Not so proud now, are you? Garrett stepped back to admire his handiwork. The woman's head now bore the evidence of his cruelty. Patches of bare scalp interspersed with uneven tufts that stuck out at angles. Maybe next time you'll think twice before walking into a federal courthouse like you belong here. He unclipped the handcuffs with a rough jerk. Then he retrieved her badge case from where it had been tossed and kicked it toward her feet, where it skidded through piles of fallen hair. Go tell whoever sent you what happens when people play games in my courthouse. The woman bent slowly to retrieve the case, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She did not open it, did not show them its contents, simply tucked it into her pocket along with the few items she gathered from the floor. When she straightened, her eyes met Garrett's for the first time since the assault began. Something flickered in their depths, there and gone too quickly to identify, but it made him take an involuntary step backward. Are we finished? Her voice remained calm, the voice of someone who had already moved past this moment to whatever came next. Get out before I decide to continue your education. She walked to the door where Murdoch still stood, waiting for him to move aside. He did so with a mocking bow that drew snickers from the other two. Have a nice day, ma'am. The door opened onto the corridor beyond. She stepped through without looking back, her shoulders straight, her bare scalp catching the fluorescent light with each step. Behind her, the 3 men exchanged looks of shared satisfaction. Another troublemaker handled. Just another morning at the courthouse. They had no idea what they had just done. If this level of racial humiliation made your blood boil, wait until you discover what this supposedly helpless woman has been hiding. Her true identity will shatter every assumption those officers made. This is not just a story about injustice. This is about the most satisfying reversal of power you will ever witness. Keep watching. The woman walked through the courthouse corridor with hair scattered across her shoulders and clinging to her blazer. She made no attempt to brush it away. Employees pressed themselves against walls as she passed, their eyes wide with something that looked like recognition mixed with fear. None of them spoke. None of them helped. She found the nearest restroom and pushed through the heavy door, locking it behind her with a click that sealed out the world. For a long moment, she stood before the row of sinks, studying her reflection in the harsh light. What looked back was almost unrecognizable. Patches of bare scalp alternated with ragged tufts of hair. Red marks from the clipper blade formed angry lines across her head. Her fingers rose to touch one of the bare patches, tracing its edge with clinical detachment. Then her hand moved to her collar, finding the small device hidden beneath the fabric. She pressed a button and a tiny light blinked twice before going dark. She pulled her phone from her pocket and dialed a number from memory. "It's done. They took the bait." A pause. A response on the other end. Badge numbers 4471 and 3829. Security supervisor witnessed and participated. The recording captured everything. Another pause, longer this time. "I've waited 8 years for this, Thaddeus. They tried to bury me once. Not again." She ended the call and tucked the phone away. In the mirror, her reflection stared back with eyes that held something far more dangerous than defeat. Patience, purpose, the certainty of someone who had just won a battle her opponents did not know had begun. 3 floors below, Garrett Sloan poured himself coffee in the break room and laughed about the morning's entertainment with his partner. "Did you see her face when I turned on those clippers? Priceless, absolutely priceless." Bryce scrolled through the photos on his phone. "Classic stuff. Bet she'll think twice before coming back here." Murdoch entered with a folder tucked under his arm. "That was clean. No witnesses who'll talk. Cameras in that section have been offline for weeks." "Relax." Garrett waved away the concern. "Nobody's going to say anything. Nobody ever does. That's the beautiful thing about this place." His phone buzzed with an incoming message, and his face split into a grin. "Union rep says the overtime approvals came through. Someone up the chain appreciates our work." The 3 men clinked their coffee cups in a toast to a system that had protected them for years and would continue protecting them forever. Or so they believed. Meanwhile, in a spacious office on the 8th floor, the woman sat behind a mahogany desk, her fingers moving across a laptop keyboard. The nameplate on the desk faced away from her, its letters invisible from her position. She opened a folder labeled Case 2023 CV405 and began adding notes with methodical precision. Times, dates, badge numbers. Exact quotes recalled with the accuracy of years of training. A soft knock interrupted her focus. "Enter." A young man pushed through the door, coffee cup in hand. His face cycled through confusion to horror as he took in her appearance. "You're—" He stopped himself, glancing at the open door behind him. "Ma'am, I cleared your schedule through noon, but there's a hearing at 2 that cannot be moved." "I'm aware." She accepted the coffee without meeting his eyes. "Sterling, close the door." He did so, his movements quick and nervous. "What happened this morning stays between us. No one else. Not the clerks, not the other staff, not anyone. Is that understood?" He nodded, his throat bobbing with a swallow. "Good. Now I need you to pull all files related to the 2 p.m. hearing. Everything, including the sealed personnel records that were supposed to be destroyed 3 years ago." Sterling's eyes widened. "Ma'am, those records are— I know exactly what they are. That's why I need them." She turned back to her laptop, dismissing him with her attention. "And Sterling, when I walk into that courtroom this afternoon, I want everyone to see exactly what was done to me. No scarves, no hats, nothing to hide it." He paused at the door. "Ma'am, are you sure that's wise? The media will see what I want them to see. Now go." The door closed behind him, leaving her alone with the hum of the laptop and the weight of years of preparation finally reaching their culmination. She opened another file, this one buried deep within encrypted folders. The label read simply, Operation Reckoning. Inside were 8 years of research, names traced through shell companies, patterns of complaints that vanished into administrative black holes, connections between officers, supervisors, and officials who should never have known each other, a web of corruption that reached far beyond 2 brutal cops and their complicit supervisor. She had tried to expose this network once before, during her years as a federal prosecutor. She had built a case that should have brought down dozens of corrupt officials. She had believed the evidence would speak for itself. Instead, she had received a late-night visit from supervisors who explained in gentle terms that her investigation was being terminated. National security concerns, political considerations. Her evidence would be sealed, and she would be reassigned. A promotion that felt more like exile. For 8 years, she had watched from her new position as the same patterns continued. The same officers facing complaint after complaint with no consequences. The same supervisors signing off on dismissals. The same system protecting the powerful and abandoning the vulnerable. But now she had something she hadn't possessed before. Documentation of a crime committed against her own person. Evidence she controlled entirely. Leverage that even the most powerful players couldn't easily neutralize. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, opening a new document. Phase 2, she typed. Bait taken. Evidence secured. Timeline accelerating. Outside her window, the city stretched toward the horizon. Somewhere down there, Garrett Sloan was finishing his coffee and planning his lunch. Bryce Carver was showing off photos to colleagues. Hollis Murdoch was filing paperwork that would never mention what happened in that room. None of them knew what was coming. None of them would see it until it was far too late. 3 weeks earlier, the same courthouse had hosted a very different scene. Sunlight streamed through tall windows as attorneys arranged papers at their respective tables. The gallery filled with spectators whose whispered conversations created a low hum of anticipation. This was the Trevino case, and everyone who followed local news knew what it represented. At the defense table, officers Garrett Sloan and Bryce Carver sat with the casual confidence of men who had never faced real consequences. Their uniforms pressed to perfection, their badges polished to a shine. Behind them, a wall of fellow officers filled 3 rows, their presence a silent statement of solidarity. The plaintiff's table told a different story. Marcus Trevino sat alone with his public defender, a young woman whose exhaustion showed in every line of her face. Marcus was 23 years old, though he looked older after 18 months of fighting a system designed to protect the men who had hurt him. The side door opened and a figure in black robes emerged. The gallery rose as one. All rise. Case number 2023 CV 405. Trevino versus Officers Sloan and Carver. The figure took her seat at the elevated bench, her face partially obscured by the angle and the shadows. She arranged papers with methodical precision before looking up at the assembled parties. Be seated. Is the plaintiff ready to proceed? The public defender stood on shaky legs. Ready, Your Honor. And the defense? A silver-haired attorney rose with practiced smoothness. Ready, Your Honor. Though we would like to note for the record our continued objection to certain witnesses the plaintiff intends to call. Your objection is noted and overruled as it was yesterday. Proceed with your witness, counselor. The public defender called Marcus Trevino to the stand. He walked to the witness box with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of the night that had brought him here. After being sworn in, he took his seat and faced the gallery where his attackers watched with expressions of bored contempt. Mr. Trevino, please describe what happened on the night of March 15th. Marcus drew a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. I was walking home from my shift at the warehouse. Around 11:30, I had my work badge on and my lunch bag in my hand. Officers Sloan and Carver pulled their cruiser onto the sidewalk and told me to stop. Did they give a reason? Said I matched the description of a robbery suspect, but there wasn't any robbery. I checked later. No report, no call, nothing. His hands gripped the arms of the chair. They told me to put my hands on the hood of their car. I did. I cooperated with everything. Then Officer Sloan said he saw something in my waistband. There was nothing there. My shirt was tucked in. What happened next? Officer Carver grabbed my arm and twisted it behind my back. When I asked what I'd done wrong, Officer Sloan hit me in the stomach. I went down. His voice cracked. They both started. They kept hitting me, kicking. At one point, Officer Sloan pulled out his baton. I heard something crack. I thought I was going to die. From the defense table, a snort of dismissal. Garrett leaned toward his attorney and whispered something that made both men smile. The judge's voice cut through from the bench, sharp and sudden. Officer Sloan, is there something amusing about this testimony? Garrett straightened, his smile fading but his eyes holding no remorse. No, Your Honor, just disagreement with the characterization. You will have opportunity to present your version. Until then, silence. From her elevated position, the judge observed his expression with careful attention. The dismissive assessment, the assumption of superiority. She filed it away without revealing her thoughts. Continue, Mr. Trevino. Marcus wiped his eyes. When they finally stopped, I couldn't move. 3 broken ribs, fractured cheekbone, ruptured spleen, 2 weeks in the hospital. Doctors said if the internal bleeding had been worse, I wouldn't have survived. Were charges filed? They arrested me. The words came out flat. Said I resisted arrest and assaulted an officer. I spent 3 months in county before charges were dropped. And the officers? Internal Affairs said insufficient evidence. Case closed in 2 weeks. The public defender approached with documents. I enter into evidence Exhibit A, the original incident report filed by the officers, and Exhibit B, medical records from Mr. Trevino's hospitalization. She turned to face the gallery. Your Honor, the incident report states Mr. Trevino was combative, that he swung at officers, that minimal force was required. It mentions nothing about a baton, nothing about kicks to the ribs, nothing about the 23 separate injuries documented in his medical file. She placed the documents on the evidence table. Someone is lying. Either my client fabricated 23 injuries and convinced multiple doctors to document an assault that never happened, or these officers falsified their report. The defense attorney rose smoothly. Objection. Counsel is making inflammatory accusations without foundation. The judge paused, her pen tapping against her notepad. Overruled. The discrepancy speaks to a central question in this case. Garrett shifted, exchanging a glance with Bryce. Another bleeding heart. Nothing they couldn't handle. As if on cue, a man in the gallery rose and walked toward the door. He passed close to the plaintiff's table, and a small envelope fell from his hand, landing near the public defender's feet. The young attorney's face drained of color as she recognized the man. Her hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. Your Honor, the plaintiff requests a brief recess. The judge studied the attorney's sudden pallor. Is everything all right, counselor? Yes, I just need to consult with my client. Very well, 30 minutes. The recess extended past an hour. When the public defender returned, her face wore the careful composition of someone delivering very bad news. Your Honor, the plaintiff wishes to discuss settlement options. The words landed like stones in still water. Marcus sat frozen at the plaintiff's table, his eyes fixed on some distant point. Whatever hope had brought him here had drained away during that recess. The defense attorney's smile spread like oil across his face. The defense is always open to reasonable discussions. From the bench, the judge observed the dynamics playing out before her. Witnesses intimidated, plaintiffs pressured into settlements. The machinery of injustice operating with practiced efficiency. She made a note on her pad. A settlement conference will be scheduled. In the meantime, I want all documentation related to this case, including internal affairs files and prior complaints against the officers. The defense attorney's smile faltered. Your Honor, those are sealed personnel records. I am exercising my authority to review materials relevant to a civil rights case. Is there some reason the department would object? A long silence. We'll consult with legal counsel. Do that. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell with a crack that echoed longer than it should have. Don't face legal battles unprepared like the corrupt officers in this story. Legal Shield provides instant access to qualified attorneys for just $24.95 monthly. Document everything. Know your rights. Get professional legal consultation whenever you need it. Whether you are protecting yourself from workplace discrimination or fighting for justice, Legal Shield has your back. Start your protection today at LegalShield.com/justice. Your first month is free. Present day. The afternoon following the assault. She sat in chambers reviewing case files when Sterling knocked and entered with a tablet displaying incoming messages. The sealed records arrived, and there's something else. He placed a thick folder on her desk. The label read, Internal Affairs, Complaints Against Officers G. Sloan and B. Carver, sealed by order. She opened it and began reading. 47 complaints spanning 12 years. Excessive force, racial profiling. Falsified reports, intimidation of witnesses, each one investigated by Internal Affairs. Each one marked unfounded or insufficient evidence. Each one signed off by the same name, Sergeant Doyle Beckett. She pulled another file from the stack. Beckett's personnel record showed 2 promotions in 3 years, both approved by Deputy Commissioner Laurel Ashford. His evaluation reports glowed with praise for his efficiency and discretion. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it. Sterling, I need you to cross-reference these complaint dates with court filings. Find every civil suit brought against Sloan and Carver. Check which judges were assigned and how each case was resolved. That could take days. Then start now. He hesitated at the door. Ma'am, there's something else. A clerk named Winston Pruitt has been asking questions. Wants to know if you'll be in court tomorrow. Seemed very interested in your schedule. She filed the name away. Winston Pruitt. Another thread to follow. Tell him nothing. And Sterling? Watch him. Note who he talks to, where he goes. You think he's connected to what happened this morning? She looked up from the files, her expression revealing nothing. I think everyone in this building is connected to something. Our job is to find out what. The courtroom reconvened the following morning with a different energy than before. Word had spread through unofficial channels that something had happened to the judge, though details remained frustratingly vague. The gallery buzzed with whispered speculation. At the defense table, Garrett and Bryce sat in fresh uniforms, their confidence undimmed. They had heard the rumors, of course, some kind of altercation at security. But rumors were common in courthouses, and none of them ever touched officers with their connections. The side door opened. She entered wearing her black robes, her shaved head visible to everyone in the room. The patches, the uneven stubble, the red marks where the blade had cut too close. Collective intake of breath. Murmurs rippling through the gallery like waves. At the defense table, Garrett's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. His face cycled through confusion to recognition to something that looked almost like fear. He leaned toward Bryce and whispered frantically, That's her. That's the woman from yesterday. Bryce's face went pale. No way. Can't be. I'm telling you, that's her. Same face, same everything. How is she? Officer Sloan. The voice from the bench cut through his whisper like a blade. Is there something you wish to share with the court? Garrett's mouth opened and closed without sound. His attorney gripped his arm in warning. No, Your Honor, nothing. She held his gaze for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until it became its own statement. Then she shuffled the papers before her. Very well. We will continue with the matter at hand. But she saw it. The way Garrett's confident posture had crumbled. The way Bryce's hands trembled against the table. They knew who she was now. They knew what they had done. And they had no idea what came next. Throughout the morning session, she maintained perfect composure, ruled on motions with precision, asked questions that probed the weaknesses in the defense's arguments, gave no indication that anything unusual had occurred, but the defendants knew. Every time she looked in their direction, they flinched. Every time she spoke, they held their breath. They were waiting for the hammer to fall, and the waiting was destroying them. During the lunch recess, Garrett cornered his attorney in a conference room. We need to do something. File a motion. Get her removed. On what grounds? She hasn't done anything improper in these proceedings. She's the woman we... He stopped himself, suddenly aware of how many ears might be listening. There was an incident yesterday. She's going to try to use this case against us. The attorney's face went still. What kind of incident? Security matter. Routine stuff. But she might try to spin it. Garrett, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Nothing that matters. Look, just file something. Say she's biased. Say she has a conflict of interest. Anything to get her off this case. The attorney studied him with eyes that had seen too many guilty men try to talk their way out of trouble. I'll see what I can do. But Garrett, whatever happened, I need to know about it. All of it. Because if it comes out in court and I'm blindsided, there's nothing I can do to help you. Garrett's jaw tightened. It won't come out. We made sure of that. 3 days later, a new witness appeared in the Trevino case. Shayla Briggs took the stand with the careful movements of someone carrying invisible wounds. She was 28 years old, with eyes that had aged decades in the past 2 years. Ms. Briggs, what is your relationship to this case? My brother was Darnell Briggs. He died in police custody 3 years ago. The gallery stirred. Garrett shifted in his seat, his earlier confidence now completely evaporated. Can you tell us what happened to your brother? He was stopped for a broken taillight. Officers Sloan and Carver. Same officers on trial today. Her voice remained steady, but her hands gripped the railing of the witness stand. 45 minutes later, they called an ambulance. Said Darnell had suffered a medical emergency during a routine arrest. By the time he reached the hospital, he was brain dead. Was there an investigation? Internal Affairs ruled it a tragic accident. Said Darnell had pre-existing conditions that contributed to his death. They cleared the officers within 2 weeks. Did you pursue civil action? I tried. Filed a wrongful death suit. 3 months in, my attorney received a visit from someone who explained that continuing the case would be unwise. She withdrew the next day. No other lawyer in the city would touch it. She looked directly at Garrett, her gaze unwavering. I've waited 3 years for someone to listen. 3 years watching these men walk free while my brother's children grow up without their father. The defense attorney rose. Objection, Your Honor. This testimony is prejudicial and beyond the scope of the current case. From the bench, she considered the objection for a long moment. Overruled. Under Federal Rule of Evidence 404B, evidence of other wrongs may be admissible to prove pattern, intent, or absence of mistake. The plaintiff alleges systematic misconduct. This testimony speaks directly to that allegation. She turned to face Garrett, her expression unreadable. The defense is welcome to explain why multiple unrelated witnesses share such similar stories about their encounters with these officers. Garrett said nothing. But the blood had drained from his face, and his hands would not stop shaking. Stories like this remind us why silence is never an option. Every like, every share, every subscription amplifies voices that powerful people want silenced. If you believe that no badge should be above the law, hit that subscribe button and join the millions demanding accountability. The pattern continued to emerge, witness by witness, document by document. A middle-aged man who had asked why officers were searching his car without a warrant. He left the encounter with a broken nose and charges for resisting arrest. A teenager who had been recording a traffic stop on his phone. The officers deleted his footage before charging him with interfering with police operations. An elderly woman who had called 911 to report a burglary and ended up being detained for 3 hours while officers searched her home without consent. Each story followed the same pattern. Complaint filed. Investigation opened. Case closed with no action. And threading through each testimony, names began to repeat. Sergeant Doyle Beckett from Internal Affairs, who signed off on every dismissal. Deputy Commissioner Laurel Ashford, who had promoted Beckett despite mounting evidence of misconduct. Court Clerk Winston Pruitt, who appeared in the background of multiple cases. Always present, always watching. A system designed not to deliver justice, but to prevent it and bend it. She observed it all from the bench, asking questions that seemed routine but carried deeper purposes. Each answer revealed another connection. Each document exposed another link in the chain. The defense grew increasingly desperate. Motions filed daily. Objections raised to every piece of testimony. Demands for recusal that cited everything from judicial bias to conflicts of interest. She denied them all with citations to legal precedent that left no room for appeal. Your Honor, the defense attorney tried one morning, my client's right to a fair trial is being compromised by the prejudicial nature of this testimony. Counselor, your clients have been accused of a pattern of misconduct spanning 12 years. The witnesses testifying to that pattern are directly relevant to the plaintiff's case. If your client's rights are being compromised, it is by their own alleged behavior, not by the court's willingness to hear evidence. Garrett leaned toward his attorney, his whisper carrying farther than he intended. We need to shut this down. Call Beckett. Call Ashford. Someone needs to make this go away. She heard every word, and she filed it away with everything else. The call came at 11:47 p.m., 3 weeks into the trial. She was still at her desk reviewing documents by the light of a single lamp when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. This is Detective Rowan Finch. We've never met, but I've been following your case. I think we need to talk. His voice carried the weariness of someone who had been fighting a losing battle for far too long. I'm listening. Not over the phone. There are things I need to show you. Documents I've been collecting for 6 years. Every time I try to submit them through official channels, they disappear. Why contact me? A pause filled with the weight of years. Because I saw what they did to you. I saw you walk into that courtroom and refuse to back down. You're the first person in this building who might actually do something with what I have. Where do you want to meet? The parking garage beneath the courthouse was deserted at midnight. Concrete pillars cast long shadows under scattered fluorescent lights. She waited by the elevator bank, her senses alert for any approach. Detective Finch emerged from the stairwell carrying a cardboard box. He was younger than his voice had suggested, mid-30s, with a face that had aged prematurely from too much disappointment. Thank you for coming. He set the box on a nearby car hood and began removing files. 6 years ago, I started noticing patterns. Reports that changed between first draft and final version. Officers with dozens of allegations who never faced consequences. Complaints that should have gone to Internal Affairs but vanished into nothing. He pulled out a stack of papers. These are original incident reports from 47 cases involving Sloan, Carver, and their unit. I copied them before they were altered. Compare them to the official versions, and you'll see what's been happening. She picked up the first report. The original stated the suspect was compliant. The amended version described active resistance. How did you preserve these? The IT system used to keep automatic backups before anyone realized they could be useful. I wrote a script to archive them. Everything's timestamped and verifiable. He pulled out another stack. These are communications between Sergeant Beckett and officers under his command. Instructions on how to write reports. Advice on which supervisors to route complaints through. Recommendations for which union reps to contact when problems arise. His hand found a USB drive and pressed it into her palm. Audio recordings. 37 of them. I've been wearing a wire to departmental meetings for 3 years. She examined the drive, feeling its weight. Why haven't you taken this to the FBI, the Justice Department? Finch's laugh held no humor. I tried. Twice. First time, my contact at the bureau said it was being referred back to local authorities. Second time, I got a visit from men who never showed credentials but made clear my career would end if I continued. What changed? You did. When you walked into that courtroom with your head shaved and refused to recuse yourself, I knew someone was finally willing to take the risk. He glanced around the empty garage. There's more. The network doesn't stop at Beckett and Ashford. There are judges involved, prosecutors, officials at every level. I haven't traced it all, but everything connects. She absorbed his words with focused attention. Detective, these people have already shown they're willing to use violence. You're putting yourself in danger. I know. I've lived with that for 6 years. His eyes met hers directly. But at some point you have to decide what kind of person you want to be. I decided a long time ago that I didn't become a cop to protect criminals with badges. She extended her hand. Be careful, detective. The closer we get, the more dangerous they become. He nodded and disappeared back into the stairwell, leaving her alone with evidence that could bring down an empire. Financial security gives you the freedom to fight for what is right. Rocket Money has helped members save an average of $720 per year by finding and canceling unwanted subscriptions. When you have financial stability, you have the power to stand up against injustice without fear. Take control of your money at rocketmoney.com, because your financial independence is your greatest weapon against those who want to silence you. The days that followed moved with the grinding inevitability of machinery designed to obstruct. Motions filed and denied. Witnesses called and cross-examined. Evidence entered and challenged. The defense fought for every inch, but the ground beneath them continued to erode. Sterling appeared in her chambers one afternoon with news that surprised neither of them. Winston Pruitt has been accessing case files he has no authorization to view. He's been in contact with someone at the police union, and yesterday he met with Sergeant Beckett at a coffee shop 3 blocks from here. Keep documenting. Don't confront him. There's more. The IT department flagged unusual activity on the evidence server. Someone tried to delete the backup copies of the original incident reports. The attempt was blocked, but whoever did it had administrative credentials. She processed this information without visible reaction. Can they trace who made the attempt? They're working on it, but the credentials were borrowed from someone on medical leave. Of course they were. The network had survived this long by covering its tracks with practiced efficiency. Double the backups. Store copies in locations outside the courthouse system. If they try again, I want redundancy they can't eliminate. Sterling hesitated. Ma'am, I have to ask, how long can this continue? They're going to escalate. What happened to you was just the beginning. She looked up from her desk, her expression revealing nothing of the calculations running beneath the surface. Sterling, everything that's happening now is exactly what I anticipated. Every motion they file reveals their desperation. Every attempt to destroy evidence proves consciousness of guilt. Every escalation exposes another node in their network. She returned her attention to the files before her. Let them escalate. Every step they take brings them closer to their own destruction. The attack on Detective Finch came on a Tuesday night. She learned about it through Sterling, who entered her chambers the next morning with a face the color of ash. He's in intensive care at Memorial. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding. Someone found him in his driveway around midnight. She sat perfectly still, processing. Witnesses? None. Security cameras on his street experienced a technical malfunction for exactly 23 minutes. The precision was unmistakable. This was not random violence. This was a message. Is he conscious? In and out. Doctors are saying the next 48 hours are critical. She rose and gathered her coat. The hospital corridors were quiet in the afternoon. She navigated through checkpoints with the authority of someone accustomed to having doors opened and found Finch's room on the ICU floor. He lay surrounded by monitors and tubes, his face obscured by bandages. The steady beep of machines provided the only evidence that he was still fighting. His eyes opened at the sound of footsteps. They came for the files. His voice was barely a whisper. Did they get them? A small shake of his head followed by a wince. Safe deposit box, First National. Key is under the tissue box. He gestured weakly toward the table beside his bed. My daughter's birthday is the combination for the inner lock. She found the key where he indicated. I'll make this right, Rowan. What they did to you, what they've done to everyone. It ends. His grip found her hand with surprising strength. The network goes higher than we thought. Before they started on me, one of them said something. He struggled for breath. Said I should have minded my business like Judge Cray told me to. She went still. Chief Judge Cray spoke to you directly? 6 months ago. Called me to his office after I filed my 3rd request for federal review. Told me some investigations were better left alone. His eyes began to close. Careful. They've been running this 20 years. They know how to make problems disappear. So do I, Detective. So do I. She left the hospital with the key in her pocket and a new name added to her list. Chief Judge Harland Cray. The man who had mentored her through her early years on the bench. The man who had welcomed her to the federal judiciary with practiced warmth. For 8 years he had watched her, guided her career, shaped her caseload, always keeping her busy with important work, always steering her away from certain cases. She had thought he was protecting her. Now she understood he had been protecting himself. The safe deposit box at First National contained everything Finch had promised. Original incident reports, audio recordings, email chains documenting systematic suppression, financial records showing payments to officers whose complaints were dismissed. And at the bottom of the box, a photograph that made her breath catch. 3 men at a restaurant table, Chief Judge Harlan Cray, Deputy Commissioner Laurel Ashford, and a third face she would need to identify. On the back, in Finch's careful handwriting, Monthly coordination meeting. Documentation attached. She photographed everything and uploaded copies to encrypted storage. Then she replaced the contents exactly as found. When she returned to her chambers, Sterling was waiting. The chief judge has requested an emergency meeting. Tomorrow at 3, his office. Of course he has. She sat behind her desk and considered the web of connections spreading out before her. Cray, Ashford, Beckett, Pruitt, Sloan, Carver, Murdoch, and somewhere above them all, a third face in a photograph she had not yet identified. Sterling, I need you to find something for me. 3 years ago, a wrongful death case involving Darnell Briggs was dropped when the plaintiff's attorney withdrew. I want to know who visited that attorney, what was said, and who paid for the visit. That could take time. Then start now. And Sterling? He paused at the door. Whatever happens in the next few weeks, I need to know you're with me, all the way. He met her eyes without flinching. All the way, whatever it takes. Good. Because this is about to get much worse before it gets better. The envelope arrived that evening, slipped under her door while she worked late. Plain white. No return address. Her name in block letters. Inside, a photograph of her walking into the courthouse that morning. Her shaved head visible. Her face captured in perfect clarity. And a note in the same block letters. We know what you're building. Stop now, or what happened to Finch will seem like a kindness. She studied the photograph for a long moment. The angle suggested surveillance capabilities beyond casual observation. The timing suggested desperation. They were scared. Scared people made mistakes. She opened her laptop and began composing a message, attaching photos of the envelope and its contents. Then she turned the photograph over and wrote a single word on the back. Reckoning. The game was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. You are about to witness the moment when everything changes. The revelation coming next will leave those officers speechless, and it will leave you cheering. Her true identity has been hidden in plain sight. And trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when the full truth emerges. Keep watching for part 2. The federal agents arrived at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes ahead of schedule. 3 black SUVs pulled into the courthouse parking structure in tight formation, their windows tinted dark enough to hide whatever preparations were happening inside. Special Agent Sutton Graves emerged from the lead vehicle with the controlled urgency of someone who had done this many times before. She was tall and lean, with close-cropped hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they touched. Behind her, a team of 6 agents fanned out to secure the perimeter. They moved with the practiced efficiency of professionals who understood that the next few hours would determine the success or failure of an investigation years in the making. Sterling met them at the service entrance, his face tight with the tension of a man who had not slept. Judge Vaughn is in her chambers. She's been here since 5. Graves nodded. And Carver? We have eyes on him. He's at home with his daughter, hasn't left since yesterday afternoon. Good. Keep it that way until we're ready. They moved through the courthouse corridors with purpose, drawing curious glances from early arriving staff who sensed something significant was unfolding. The presence of federal agents in a local courthouse was never routine, and whispers began spreading before they had even reached the elevator. She was waiting for them in her chambers, standing by the window with her back to the door. The morning light caught the stubble on her scalp, now grown just enough to soften the harsh patches left by Garrett's clippers. She did not turn when they entered. Agent Graves, thank you for coming. Judge Vaughn. Graves closed the door behind her, leaving the other agents to secure the hallway. We need to move quickly. Our intelligence suggests they know we're coming. They've known for days. The question is what they're willing to do about it. She finally turned, and Graves saw something in her eyes that she had seen in very few people throughout her career. Not fear, not even determination. Something older and harder. The look of someone who had already calculated every possible outcome and accepted whatever price would be required. The Carver family? Protective detail is en route. They'll be in federal custody within the hour. Graves pulled out a tablet and began reviewing files. But there's something you need to know first. Something we discovered last night. She placed the tablet on the desk, its screen displaying a photograph that made the room feel suddenly smaller. 3 men at a restaurant table. Chief Judge Harlan Cray, Deputy Commissioner Laurel Ashford, and a third face that she had not yet identified. We know who the third man is. Graves zoomed in on the unfamiliar face. Distinguished, silver-haired, the kind of features that appeared on campaign posters and news broadcasts. Senator Marcus Whitfield, Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the man responsible for confirming federal judges across the Eastern Seaboard. The implications settled over the room like a weight. He's been protecting the network from above. Every time a complaint reached federal level, every time an investigation threatened to expose the local corruption, Whitfield made sure it went nowhere. He's the reason your case was shut down 8 years ago. She absorbed this information without visible reaction. But in my mind, pieces that had never quite fit were finally clicking into place. The sudden termination of her investigation, the sealed evidence, the promotion that felt like exile, all of it orchestrated by someone with enough power to reach into federal agencies and redirect their priorities. How deep does it go? Deep enough that we've been building our own case in parallel for the past 3 years, waiting for the right moment to move. Graves met her eyes directly. Your actions over the past few weeks have accelerated our timeline significantly. The evidence you've gathered, combined with what we already have, is enough to bring down the entire network. Not just the local players, all of them, including Whitfield. But we need Carver's testimony to complete the chain. He's the link between the street-level enforcement and the administrative cover-up. Without him, we have patterns and suspicions. With him, we have proof. She walked to her desk and opened the drawer where she had stored the threatening note from the previous evening. They know about Carver. They threatened his daughter. Graves examined the note with professional detachment. This will be added to the evidence. Witness intimidation carries its own charges, but it also confirms how desperate they've become. Desperate people are dangerous people, which is why we're moving today. The trial resumes at 10. Carver will testify under federal protection. By noon, we'll have enough on the record to issue arrest warrants for Cray, Ashford, Beckett, and Whitfield's local contacts. The senator himself will be taken into custody in Washington before the evening news cycle. She considered the timeline. Compressed. Risky, but necessary. What do you need from me? Keep the trial moving. Don't let the defense stall. Every piece of testimony that enters the record strengthens our position. Graves paused. And Judge Vaughn? When Carver takes the stand, let him tell his story. All of it. The things he's done. The orders he followed. The moment he decided to stop following them. You want the jury to hear everything? I want the country to hear everything. This isn't just about convicting a few corrupt officers anymore. This is about exposing a system that has been crushing people for 2 decades. The more daylight we let in, the harder it will be for anyone to bury it again. She nodded slowly. Then let's give them something they can't look away from. This incredible story proves that truth always finds a way to surface. If you have been moved by what you have witnessed so far, subscribe now and join the millions who believe that no badge should be above the law. The revelation coming next will change everything. The courtroom at 10 a.m. looked like a stage set for history. Every seat in the gallery was occupied. Reporters from national networks had joined the local press, their cameras positioned to capture whatever was about to unfold. Community activists sat shoulder to shoulder with courthouse regulars who sensed that something unprecedented was happening. The energy in the room crackled with anticipation. At the defense table, Garrett Sloan sat rigid with barely contained fury. His attorney had spent the morning trying to prepare him for what was coming, but nothing could truly prepare a man for the collapse of everything he had believed would protect him. Beside him, the chair reserved for Bryce Carver sat empty. The prosecution table had expanded overnight. U.S. Attorney Cordelia Vance now sat beside the original plaintiff's counsel, her presence a signal that federal resources had joined the fight. Behind them, Agent Graves watched the proceedings from the front row of the gallery, her expression revealing nothing. The side door opened and she entered wearing her black robes. The gallery rose as one, the familiar ritual, but today, there was nothing routine about it. She took her place at the bench and surveyed the transformed courtroom. So many faces watching, so many lives affected by what would happen in the next few hours, so many years of injustice waiting to be addressed. Be seated. She arranged her papers with deliberate precision, letting the silence stretch until it became its own form of communication. Before we proceed with today's testimony, the court has several matters to address. The defense attorney rose immediately. Your Honor, my client wishes to note for the record that Officer Carver's absence from these proceedings constitutes a violation of counsel. Your client's co-defendant is not absent. He is in federal custody and will be testifying as a witness for the prosecution. The words landed like a physical blow. Garrett's face drained of color. His attorney gripped the table for support. That's impossible. Bryce wouldn't. Officer Sloan, you will remain silent or be removed from this courtroom. She turned to the prosecution table. Is the witness ready? Cordelia Vance stood with the measured confidence of someone who had been building toward this moment for longer than anyone in the room knew. The United States calls Officer Bryce Carver to the stand. The side door opened again, and Bryce entered flanked by 2 federal marshals. He wore civilian clothes, his police uniform stripped away along with everything it had represented. His face bore the haunted expression of a man who had crossed a line from which there was no return. The gallery erupted in whispered exclamations that the gavel struggled to quiet. "Order! This court will have order!" Bryce took his seat in the witness box and was sworn in with a voice that barely rose above a whisper. His eyes found Garrett's across the courtroom, and something passed between them. Not hatred, not fear. Something closer to grief for a partnership that had led them both to this moment. "Officer Carver?" Cordelia Vance approached the witness stand with papers in her hand. "You have been granted immunity from federal prosecution in exchange for your testimony today. Is that correct?" "Yes. And you understand that this immunity is contingent upon your complete and truthful cooperation?" "I understand." "Then let us begin." She placed the papers on the railing before him. "How long have you worked with Officer Garrett Sloan?" 12 years. We came up through the academy together, worked patrol together, transferred to the same units. He was my partner for most of my career. And during those 12 years, did you participate in activities that violated the civil rights of citizens? Bryce's hands gripped the railing of the witness stand. The moment stretched. Then, yes. The single word carried more weight than any speech could have managed. Reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras clicked. The gallery seemed to hold its collective breath. "Tell us about those activities." Bryce began speaking, and what emerged was a catalog of systematic abuse spanning more than a decade. Traffic stops that became harassment campaigns. Arrests manufactured from nothing. Reports falsified to cover misconduct. Witnesses intimidated into silence. Evidence planted to justify violence after the fact. He named names, dated incidents, described the coordination between street-level officers, internal affairs supervisors, and courthouse officials who ensured that complaints disappeared into administrative voids. We called it the blue umbrella. Everyone underneath stayed dry no matter how hard it rained. Complaints went to Beckett. Beckett made them go away. If something got past him, Ashford stepped in. If it threatened to reach federal level, there were other people who handled it. What other people? I don't know all the names, but I know Chief Judge Cray was part of it. I heard Garrett talking to him once on the phone. Something about making sure a case got assigned to the right judge. From the gallery, a commotion drew attention. Chief Judge Harland Cray had risen from his seat and was attempting to push toward the exit. 2 federal agents intercepted him before he could reach the door. "Chief Judge Harland Cray," Agent Graves's voice cut through the chaos. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to deprive citizens of civil rights under 18 U.S.C. Section 241, obstruction of justice and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." The gallery exploded. Reporters rushed toward the exits with phones pressed to their ears. Spectators stood on benches to see the arrest. The gavel cracked repeatedly against its block. "Order! This court will maintain order!" The agents led Cray toward a side door, his wrists secured behind his back. As he passed the bench, his eyes found hers for one brief moment. She saw recognition there, understanding, and something that might have been respect for an opponent who had finally outmaneuvered him. Then he was gone, and the courtroom slowly returned to something resembling calm. "Mr. Carver," she addressed the witness directly, her voice steady despite the chaos that had just unfolded. "You may continue your testimony." Bryce swallowed hard, visibly shaken by what he had just witnessed. "I want to explain why I'm here, why I decided to cooperate." "Please." 3 weeks ago, I helped Garrett assault a woman in the security room. We didn't know who she was, just thought she was another nobody we could push around. We shaved her head, took pictures, laughed about it afterward like it was nothing. His voice cracked. That night, I went home and my daughter was watching the news. She saw the coverage of what happened, saw the woman walking into the courthouse with her head shaved. My little girl looked at me and asked if I was one of the officers who did that. The courtroom had gone absolutely silent. I lied to her, told her I wasn't involved, but she kept looking at me with these eyes that said she knew. She's 12 years old, and she knew her father was lying. Tears began streaming down his face. A few days later, she asked me a question I couldn't lie my way out of. She asked me if I was a bad person, not if I did a bad thing, if I was bad, like it was something inside me that couldn't be fixed. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I tried to tell her I was just following orders. That's what I always told myself. Just doing what the job required, going along with what Garrett wanted, playing the game the way everyone else played it. What did she say? She said that's what the Nazis said. The word landed in the courtroom like a bomb. Several jurors visibly recoiled. A woman in the gallery began crying softly. My 12-year-old daughter compared me to a Nazi, and I couldn't tell her she was wrong. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a stack of papers that had been entered into evidence. I kept records of everything, every order, every cover-up, every payment that came through unofficial channels. I told myself it was protection in case things went wrong. But really, I think part of me always knew this day would come. Part of me was waiting for a reason to stop being the person I had become. He looked directly at Garrett across the courtroom. I'm sorry, partner, but I can't do this anymore. I can't look my daughter in the eye and lie about who I am. Garrett erupted from his chair. You coward! After everything I did for you, after all the times I covered your mistakes, this is how you repay me? Marshals moved to restrain him as his attorney desperately tried to regain control. Officer Sloan, you will be removed from this courtroom. She set us up! Garrett was screaming now, spittle flying from his lips as the marshals struggled to contain him. That woman set the whole thing up. She wanted us to do it. She was recording everything. The courtroom erupted into chaos, spectators shouting, cameras flashing, the gavel cracking uselessly against the block. Remove Officer Sloan. Clear the courtroom if necessary. The marshals dragged Garrett toward the exit, his screams echoing off the marble walls. This isn't justice. This is a setup. You'll all see. She planned everything. The door swung shut behind him, muffling his continued protests. Slowly, gradually, order returned to the chamber. People resumed their seats. Reporters stopped their rush toward the exits. The silence that followed felt almost sacred. She waited until the room had settled completely before speaking. Mr. Carver, do you need a moment? Bryce shook his head, wiping the last of his tears. No, ma'am. I need to finish this. Then please continue. Financial security gives you the freedom to fight for what is right. Rocket Money has helped members save an average of $720 per year by finding and canceling unwanted subscriptions. When you have financial stability, you have the power to stand up against injustice without fear. Take control of your money at rocketmoney.com, because your financial independence is your greatest weapon against those who want to silence you. The testimony continued for another 3 hours, each revelation more damning than the last. Bryce described the monthly meetings between officers and internal affairs supervisors where they coordinated which complaints would be buried and which required more aggressive handling. He explained the system of payments that flowed through unofficial channels, bonuses for officers who maintained the blue wall of silence and penalties for those who wavered. He identified the judges who could be counted on to rule favorably in misconduct cases, the prosecutors who declined to file charges despite overwhelming evidence, the court clerks who lost documents and delayed proceedings until witnesses gave up or disappeared. When he finished, the prosecution entered his documentation into evidence. Page after page of records that traced the corruption from street-level enforcement to the highest offices in the district. No further questions at this time. Cordelia Vance returned to her seat and the defense attorney rose for cross-examination. His face betrayed the hopelessness of his position, but professional obligation demanded he try. Officer Carver, you've testified to committing numerous crimes over a 12-year period. Is that correct? Yes. And you're receiving immunity from prosecution in exchange for this testimony? Yes. So you have a significant personal interest in telling the prosecutors exactly what they want to hear, don't you? Bryce met the attorney's eyes without flinching. I have a significant personal interest in being able to look my daughter in the eye again. That's why I'm here. You expect this court to believe that a decorated officer with 12 years of service suddenly developed a conscience because his daughter asked him a question? I expect this court to believe the documents I provided, the audio recordings, the financial records, the pattern of evidence that proves everything I've said. Bryce leaned forward in the witness chair. I'm not asking anyone to trust me. I'm asking them to look at the proof. The attorney shuffled through his papers, searching for another angle of attack. Your Honor, the defense moves to strike this testimony as unreliable given the witness's obvious motivation to... Denied. Her voice cut through the objection like a blade. The jury is capable of weighing the witness's credibility against the documentary evidence presented. Continue your cross-examination or yield the floor. The attorney looked at his notes, at the jury, at his client's empty chair. Then he sat down. No further questions. The witness may step down. Bryce rose from the stand and walked toward the door where the federal marshals waited to escort him back to protective custody. As he passed the bench, he paused and looked up at her. I'm sorry for what we did to you. There's no excuse, no justification. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. She held his gaze for a long moment. Your apology is noted for the record, Mr. Carver. What matters now is what you do with the rest of your life. He nodded once, then continued toward the door. The marshals fell in beside him and he disappeared into the corridor, leaving behind a courtroom that would never forget what it had witnessed. This court will recess for 1 hour. When we reconvene, the prosecution may call additional witnesses. The gavel fell, and the gallery began to empty in a buzz of excited conversation. But she remained at her bench, staring at the documents spread before her, thinking about 12-year-old girls who asked their fathers hard questions and changed the course of history. The afternoon session brought a cascade of evidence that buried what remained of the defense's case. Audio recordings played through the courtroom speakers, filling the air with the voices of men who had believed they would never face consequences for their words. Beckett instructing officers on report falsification. Ashford authorizing the suppression of complaints. Cray discussing which judges could be trusted to rule appropriately. Each recording was authenticated by FBI analysts who testified to the chain of custody and the methods used to verify authenticity. The defense objections grew increasingly desperate and were denied with citations to precedent that left no room for appeal. Documentary evidence followed. Financial records showing payments that could not be explained through legitimate channels. Email chains documenting the coordination between department supervisors and courthouse officials. Internal memoranda that laid out the strategies for maintaining the system of protection that had operated for 2 decades. Witness after witness took the stand to describe their encounters with the network. Victims who had been silenced. Complainants who had been threatened. Officers who had tried to report misconduct and found their careers destroyed. By late afternoon, the picture was complete, not just of individual misconduct, but of an entire ecosystem of corruption that had thrived in the shadow of institution meant to protect the public. Does the prosecution rest? Cordelia Vance rose. The United States rests, Your Honor. Does the defense wish to present witnesses? The defense attorney stood slowly, his shoulders carrying the weight of an impossible task. Your Honor, in light of today's developments, the defense requests a continuance to be denied. Does the defense wish to present witnesses? A long pause. Then, the defense rests. Very well. Closing arguments will be heard tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell for the final time that day, and she rose from the bench as the gallery erupted in conversation. Reporters rushed to file their stories. Attorneys gathered their papers with varying degrees of relief and despair. Spectators processed what they had witnessed with the shell-shocked expressions of people who had just watched the impossible become real. She retreated to her chambers, closing the door on the chaos outside. The afternoon sun slanted through her windows, casting long shadows across the desk where evidence files lay in organized stacks. Sterling entered with a tablet displaying the latest developments. Ashford was taken into custody an hour ago. Beckett surrendered to federal agents at his home. Murdoch is cooperating with investigators in exchange for reduced charges. And Whitfield? FBI teams in Washington executed the arrest warrant at 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time. He's being held pending arraignment. She absorbed the information without visible reaction. The network was collapsing, domino after domino falling in rapid succession. Everything she had worked toward for 8 years was finally happening. There's something else. Sterling hesitated. The media is requesting statements. They want to know your story. What happened to you? Why you didn't recuse yourself? How long you've been planning this? My story will come out in due time. Right now, what matters is completing the trial and ensuring that the convictions stick. Judge Vaughn, Sterling stepped closer, his voice dropping. You've won. You've exposed the network. You've brought down people who thought they were untouchable. Whatever happens now, that can't be undone. She turned to face him, and for the first time since the assault, allowed something like satisfaction to show in her expression. Not yet, Sterling. We haven't won until the jury delivers its verdict, until the sentences are handed down, until the reforms are implemented and the victims receive acknowledgement of what was done to them. She touched the stubble on her scalp, now grown enough to suggest the hair that would eventually return. They shaved my head to teach me my place. Tomorrow, I'm going to show them exactly where my place is, on that bench, delivering justice, proving that no amount of intimidation can silence someone who refuses to be broken. And after tomorrow, she looked out the window at the city below, its lights beginning to flicker on as evening approached. After tomorrow, we deal with what comes next. There are still names on that list we haven't identified, still connections that reach higher than we've traced. The network we've exposed is just one branch of something larger. You're not going to stop. I can't stop. Not now. Not ever. She turned back to face him. Go home, Sterling. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day. He nodded and moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. For what it's worth, Judge Vaughn, I've never been prouder to work for anyone in my life. The door closed behind him, leaving her alone with the setting sun and the weight of everything that had been revealed. Transform your passion for justice into real career power. Purdue University Global's criminal justice program prepares you to reform the system from within. 100% online flexibility, affordable tuition, and expert faculty who have worked in the field. Do not just watch change happen. Create it. Over 175 career-focused programs await you. Apply now at purdueglobal.edu and start building the future you deserve. Closing arguments the next morning were almost anticlimactic. The prosecution laid out the case with surgical precision, connecting each piece of evidence to the charges, each witness statement to the pattern of misconduct. The defense offered what mitigation it could, arguing for the humanity of officers who had made mistakes under pressure. But even the attorney's voice carried the resignation of someone who knew the cause was lost. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the courtroom fell silent with an anticipation that seemed to stop time itself. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair, unfolded the paper in her hands. On the charge of deprivation of civil rights under color of law, we find the defendant Garrett Sloan guilty. Gasps from the gallery, but there was more. On the charge of assault, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation, guilty. On the charge of falsifying official documents, guilty. Each verdict landed like a hammer blow. Garrett sat motionless at the defense table, his face frozen in an expression that seemed unable to process what was happening. On all charges relating to the assault on Judge Meredith Valentin, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Cheers from some sections of the gallery. Tears from others. Reporters rushed for the exits to file their breaking news reports. She let the celebration continue for several moments before bringing the gavel down. Order. The court thanks the jury for their service. Sentencing will be scheduled for 2 weeks from today. As the gallery began to empty, she remained at the bench, watching Garrett being led away in handcuffs. He looked back at her once, his eyes filled with the particular hatred of someone who had lost everything because of a person he had believed was beneath him. She met his gaze without flinching, without satisfaction, without anything but the steady calm of someone who had simply done what justice required. The sentencing hearing arrived on a gray morning 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed once again, though the energy had shifted from anticipation to resolution. Everyone knew what was coming. The only question was the specific numbers that would determine how long these men would spend behind bars. Garrett Sloan stood before her bench in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled, his former swagger completely extinguished. The man who had wielded power so casually against those he deemed beneath him now stood powerless himself. Officer Sloan, you have been convicted by a jury of your peers on multiple counts of civil rights violations, assault, conspiracy, and related charges. Before I pronounce sentence, is there anything you wish to say? His attorney had clearly coached him on the value of remorse, but the words that emerged still carried the bitter edge of someone who blamed everyone but himself. I served this community for 12 years. I put my life on the line every day. I did things that needed to be done, things that kept people safe. And now I'm being treated like a criminal because I followed orders and maintained discipline. She let his words hang in the air for a moment. Is that all? That's all. Very well. She opened the folder before her. Officer Garrett Sloan. The evidence presented at trial revealed not a public servant maintaining discipline, but a predator using his badge as a license to brutalize, humiliate, and terrorize the very citizens he swore to protect. Her voice carried to every corner of the silent courtroom. You targeted people based on their race, their economic status, their perceived vulnerability. You fabricated charges to justify your violence. You participated in a conspiracy to suppress complaints and protect yourself from accountability. And when you encountered someone you believed was powerless, you shaved her head while laughing at her humiliation. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The assault you committed against me was not an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a career built on abuse. The evidence showed 47 complaints filed against you over 12 years, all buried by a system designed to protect officers like you from the consequences of your actions. On the charge of deprivation of civil rights under color of law, I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison. On the charge of assault, 10 years to run consecutively. On the charges of conspiracy and witness intimidation, an additional 5 years each. She calculated the total. You will serve a minimum of 35 years before becoming eligible for parole. You are stripped of your pension and permanently barred from any position of public trust or law enforcement authority. Garrett's face had gone white. His attorney placed a steadying hand on his arm, but there was nothing to be done. The sentence was delivered. The gavel had fallen. Additionally, the court orders that all victims of your misconduct be notified of their right to pursue civil damages. The documentation entered into evidence will be made available to support their claims. She closed the folder. Officer Sloan, you believed you were untouchable. You believed the system would always protect you. You were wrong. This court hopes that the next 35 years provide you ample opportunity to reflect on the consequences of abusing the power that was entrusted to you. The marshals moved forward to escort him away. As they led him past the gallery, he kept his eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to look at the faces of the people whose lives he had damaged. The remaining sentences followed in rapid succession. Bryce Carver, whose cooperation had been essential to exposing the network, received 8 years in federal prison, reduced from the 15 he might otherwise have faced. Upon release, he would be required to complete 500 hours of community service with police reform organizations and would never again be permitted to work in law enforcement. Deputy Warden Hollis Murdoch received 5 years for his role in facilitating the assaults and suppressing evidence. His cooperation with investigators had earned him consideration, but his position of trust meant his betrayal carried additional weight. Sergeant Doyle Beckett of Internal Affairs received 12 years for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. The documentation he had signed over his career, dismissing complaint after complaint, now stood as evidence of systematic corruption. Deputy Commissioner Laurel Ashford received 10 years for her role in protecting the network from above. Her attorneys had argued for leniency based on her long career of public service, but that career had been built on a foundation of buried misconduct and silenced victims. Chief Judge Harlan Cray received 18 years, the heaviest sentence of any local official. His position at the center of the judicial system made his corruption particularly egregious. He had sworn to uphold justice and instead had spent 2 decades ensuring that it was denied. Each sentence was delivered with the same measured precision, the same careful documentation, the same refusal to show satisfaction or vengeance. This was not about personal vindication. It was about establishing a record that could not be erased or minimized. When the last defendant had been led away, she addressed the courtroom one final time. The sentences handed down today represent accountability for years of systematic abuse, but they do not represent the end of this matter. The Department of Justice has announced an expanded investigation into patterns and practices within the police department and related agencies. A federal monitor will be appointed to oversee reforms. She looked out at the gallery, finding the faces of victims who had waited years for acknowledgement of their suffering. To those who were harmed by the misconduct exposed in this trial, the court recognizes that no sentence can undo the damage you experienced. No prison term can restore what was taken from you. But it is my hope that today's judgments provide some measure of closure and demonstrate that the system is capable of holding its own accountable. She gathered her papers and rose from the bench. Court is adjourned. This incredible story proves that the truth always finds a way to surface. If you loved watching corrupt officials face the consequences of their arrogance, our next video features another hidden powerhouse whose secret identity brought down an entire criminal network. Subscribe now so you do not miss it. 6 months later, the courthouse looked different now. New security protocols, civilian oversight stations, training rooms where officers attended mandatory sessions on bias and de-escalation. The physical changes were visible, but the deeper transformation was still ongoing. She walked through the corridors that had once been the domain of those who believed themselves untouchable. Her hair had grown back, though she kept it short now, a choice rather than a consequence. Staff members nodded respectfully as she passed. Some smiled. A few whispered words of gratitude. Sterling met her outside her chambers with a tablet displaying the morning's schedule. The Reform Commission meets at 10. Senator Patterson's office called about the federal oversight legislation. And there's a reporter from the Washington Post who's been requesting an interview for 3 weeks. Tell the reporter I'll consider it after the legislation passes. What else? Detective Finch has been cleared to return to limited duty. He's been assigned to lead the new Independent Investigations Unit. She allowed herself a small smile. Finch had spent 4 months recovering from his injuries. The doctors had warned he might never walk normally again. He had proven them wrong through sheer determination. And the Briggs family? Settlement was finalized yesterday. $8.7 million. Not enough to bring Darnell back, but enough to secure his children's futures. The settlement was one of 127 that had been reached in the months since the trial. Victims of the network were finally receiving acknowledgement and compensation for what had been done to them. The money could not heal all wounds, but it represented something that had been denied for far too long. Recognition that they had been wronged. She entered her chambers and found a package waiting on her desk. No return address. plain brown wrapping. Sterling moved to intercept it. I should have that checked before you. It's fine. Something in the way the package was wrapped told her it was not a threat. Wait outside. When the door closed behind him, she carefully opened the wrapping to reveal a small wooden box. Inside, resting on velvet lining, was a silver frame containing a photograph. She recognized it immediately. A young woman in FBI Academy graduation robes, standing beside an older man whose face she had not seen in years. Retired Judge Thaddeus Moreau, her mentor. The man she had called the night of the assault. The man who had helped her plan her long campaign for justice. He had passed away 2 months earlier, peacefully in his sleep. The news had reached her in the middle of the sentencing hearings, and she had not had time to properly grieve. Beneath the photograph was a sealed envelope with her name written in his familiar handwriting. She opened it carefully, as if the paper itself was precious. The letter inside was brief. My dear Meredith, if you are reading this, then my time has come to an end and your work has finally begun. I have watched you for 20 years, first as a student, then as a prosecutor, finally as a judge. I have seen your brilliance, your determination, and your unwavering commitment to justice. I have also seen what this system does to people like us, how it breaks the ones who try to change it, how it corrupts the ones who learn to work within it, how it crushes the ones who refuse to do either. You refuse to be broken. You refuse to be corrupted. And now, at last, you have refused to be crushed. But I must warn you, what you have exposed is only one branch of a much larger tree. The network extends far beyond our district, beyond our state, beyond what any single investigation can uncover. You have lit a match, but the fire will take years to consume what needs burning. Enclosed is a list of names. Some you will recognize, others will surprise you. All of them are connected to what you have been fighting against. Use this information wisely, trust carefully, and never, ever stop believing that the truth is worth whatever price it demands. With pride and hope for your future, Thaddeus. She set the letter aside and reached back into the box. Beneath the velvet lining was a second envelope, thicker than the first. Inside were several pages covered in dense handwriting, names, dates, connections, a map of corruption that stretched across jurisdictions and reached into offices she had never imagined were compromised. She read through the list slowly, her mind racing with the implications. Some names she had already suspected, others shocked her with their apparent respectability. All of them were connected by the same web of favors and protections that had allowed the local network to operate for so long. At the bottom of the final page, a note in Moreau's hand. This is bigger than any one person. Find allies. Build coalitions. And remember that the system protects itself above all else. You will need to be smarter, more patient, and more resilient than you have ever been. I believe you are capable of this. I have always believed in you. She sat with the documents for a long time, watching the morning light move across her desk. The weight of what she was being asked to do settled over her like a mantle she had not chosen but could not refuse. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Enter. Sterling pushed through, his face troubled. Judge Vaughn, there's a call on your secure line. Someone who says they have information about Senator Whitfield's network. Transfer it to my desk. She picked up the phone, her voice revealing nothing. This is Judge Vaughn. Ochahan. A pause. Then a voice she did not recognize, digitally altered to mask its true owner. Congratulations on your victory, Judge. You've accomplished something that many believed impossible. Who is this? Someone who has been watching your career with great interest. Someone who knows that what you've exposed is only the beginning. If you have information relevant to ongoing investigations, you should contact the FBI or the Department of Justice. A soft laugh. The FBI has its own problems, Judge. So does the Department of Justice. The network you've been fighting against has roots in places that official investigations will never be permitted to reach. She gripped the phone tighter. What do you want? The same thing you want. Justice. Accountability. An end to the corruption that has poisoned our institutions for generations. And what are you offering? A partnership. Resources. Information that will help you continue the work you've started. At what price? That remains to be seen. For now, consider this a gesture of good faith. A tone indicated that a file had been transferred to her secure server. She opened it on her laptop and found a folder containing documents she had never seen before. Financial records linking Senator Whitfield to offshore accounts. Photographs of meetings between officials who had publicly denied knowing each other. Audio recordings of conversations that would end careers and potentially trigger indictments. How did you get this? That doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with it. And if I choose to investigate you instead of using what you've provided? Another laugh. You're welcome to try. But I think you'll find that your time is better spent pursuing the people who have actually done harm. Unlike me, they have victims. Unlike me, they can be brought to justice. Who are you? A friend, or at least not an enemy. The distinction may become important in the days ahead. The line went dead. She stared at the phone for a long moment, then turned to the documents on her screen. The information was explosive. If authentic, it would provide the foundation for an investigation that could bring down dozens of additional officials across multiple states. But it had come from someone operating in the shadows. Someone with resources and access that suggested they were part of the same power structure they claimed to oppose. Someone whose true motives remained hidden behind digital alterations and cryptic warnings. She thought about Moreau's letter. Trust carefully. The words had new weight now. Sterling appeared in the doorway. Judge Vaughn, is everything all right? She closed the laptop and gathered the documents from the box into a secure folder. Everything is fine, Sterling. We have work to do. The Reform Commission? Yes, and after that, I need you to set up a meeting with Agent Graves. There are some new developments she needs to know about. He nodded and withdrew, leaving her alone with the morning light and the weight of everything that had been revealed. Outside her window, the city stretched toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, the people she had exposed were beginning their long prison sentences. Somewhere out there, victims were receiving settlements and acknowledgments. Somewhere out there, the system she had fought against was beginning, slowly, to change. And somewhere in the shadows, new players were emerging. New connections were being formed. New battles were taking shape. She touched her cropped hair, remembering the feeling of the clippers against her scalp, the humiliation they had intended to inflict, the weapon they had unwittingly handed her. They had tried to teach her her place. Instead, she had shown them theirs. The phone on her desk rang again. Sterling's voice came through the intercom. Judge Vaughn, the Reform Commission is ready for you. She rose, straightening her robes, and walked toward the door. There was work to be done. There was always work to be done. But for the first time in 8 years, she was not fighting alone. The match had been lit. The fire was spreading. And no amount of water would be enough to put it out. The end of one chapter. The beginning of another. And somewhere, in a city far away, a phone rang in an office that few people knew existed. A voice answered, listened to the report, and spoke 3 words that would set the next phase in motion. Continue monitoring her. The game was far from over, but then again she had never expected it to be. 3 months later, on a quiet evening in her home office, she received another envelope. This one contained a single photograph. She recognized the setting immediately. A courthouse in another state. A woman walking through security dressed in plain clothes, her bearing suggesting someone who expected to be overlooked. On the back of the photograph, 2 words written in an unfamiliar hand. Your turn. She studied the image for a long moment. Another woman. Another courthouse. Another corrupt system waiting to be exposed. The network Meredith Vaughn had destroyed was just one branch of something much larger. Something that reached across state lines and party affiliations and institutional boundaries. Something that had been growing for decades, feeding on the silence of those who knew and the blindness of those who didn't want to see. She had lit a match in her own district. Now that match was being passed to others. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had memorized but never used. This is Judge Vaughn. I received your message. Tell me about the woman in the photograph. A pause, then a voice that was neither the anonymous caller from before nor anyone she recognized. Her name is Judge Patricia Okonkwo, Eastern District of Virginia. She's been building a case against a network similar to yours for the past 5 years. They don't know she's coming for them. What does she need? The same thing you needed. Evidence. Allies. Someone who understands what it takes to fight this kind of battle. And you think I can provide that? I think you're the only one who can. You're the only one who's done what she's trying to do. The only one who knows how to survive when they come after you. She looked at the photograph again. Another woman standing alone against a system designed to crush her. Another judge who had decided that some principles were worth any price. Set up a meeting, somewhere secure, and tell her, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Tell her she's not alone. Tell her there are others who have walked this path before her. Tell her the fire she's about to light will spread further than she can imagine. And if she asks who sent the message? Meredith smiled. The same smile she had worn in the bathroom mirror on the morning of her assault, when she had pressed the button on her hidden recorder and known that everything was about to change. Tell her it's from someone who refused to be broken. She hung up the phone and looked out at the night sky beyond her window. The war was just beginning, but for the first time she was not fighting alone. And somewhere, in courthouses across the country, other matches were being lit. Other fires were being kindled. Other judges and prosecutors and investigators were preparing to do what she had done. The system that had protected the corrupt for so long was about to discover something it had never truly faced before. People who refused to be broken, who refused to stay silent, who refused to accept that power was an excuse for abuse. The reckoning had begun, and it would not stop until every shadow had been exposed to light.